Will you tell the man what he's been like riding motorcycles for 90 years?
But a couple of times before this done, it's the time it was on the Honda automatic, wasn't it? Lots of fun there. That looks quite good there, because that looks like... Oh God, couldn't make it in.
Have we got anything approaching the sea?
Once he started, he's okay. It's that little bit of balance.
Grandson, do you want to come a bit closer?
Reggie's mine out, and his son's Peter's not in yet.
And to get this in perspective, he's actually the only bloke here who will be remembered in 100 years' time, I feel. Now, two quick stories about Len, and I've only known him since '58. That's 1958, not 1858, which gives you the measure of the man. Because, along with his supportive family, certainly in the last 50 years, he has enriched motorcycling life in a quite extraordinary way. And my first tale is from about 2 or 3 years ago when I was in Birmingham doing a job for Sotheby's, and I was with this chap looking at some old bikes, and inevitably the story got around to Vale-Onslow, and this chap said in his deep Brummie accent, he's a great patriot, you know, great patriot. And I said, I mean, I was aware of that, and I said, how do you mean, can you qualify that? He said, oh yes, he bought the trays from the toffee factory. And that made me scratch my head a bit. How can buying some trays from a toffee factory qualify you as a great patriot? Well, the story goes back to about the early 60s, when the Japanese bikes were just starting to arrive in England, and a toffee factory went belly up in Birmingham. The accountants among you will appreciate they were in a sticky financial situation. Anyway, Len bought the trays. These were trays, probably 12 inches by 18 inches, lovely shiny trays, and this is what he did with them. He had Japanese bikes at the back of the showroom and British bikes at the front of the showroom. And what he used to do each night, he would put the trays under the British bikes, because in the morning they would be covered in oil, and then in the daytime he would put those trays under the Japanese bikes. And it was a great boost for sales, and it's typical of the man, and it's a lovely story, and I think it does indeed qualify you as a patriot. And the next story is more serious, and it again gives you the measure of the man. We go back to 1958, and I was, for my sins, was racing in scrambles on a 197 Villiers Francis Barnett or Greaves. Hey, I must have been a bit younger then. We were both a bit younger. And as you bought a scrambler in those days, be it a James or a Francis Barnett or a Greaves or a Dot or a Cotton, it had a 197 Villiers engine, Villiers, which was a huge factory in Wolverhampton, been going many, many years, and it had 9.5 horsepower. The road ones only had 8.5 horsepower. And you would, if you had a bob or two, you would take it to a tuner and he would soup it up. The bike would then produce about 6 or 7 horsepower, or so it seemed. Anyway, these were very slow in a straight line, but on downhills and over bumps, the 197s were actually going quicker than the 350s and the 500s, which in those days had maybe 20 or 25 horsepower. Suddenly, onto the market came the Vale-Onslow cylinder conversion, which was 250cc, and it bolted straight onto your 197 bottom half. I think they cost 20 quid then? About 20 quid. And Len had the foresight and the energy to finance this and make it and get it done and market it, designed by Herman Meyer. Overnight, these little 197 devices went from 9 horsepower to about 14 horsepower, which sounds a bit corny, but in fact that was about a 35% growth in horsepower, and he, Len, revolutionised the scramble world. It immediately closed the gap on the 197s, the new 250s. We immediately closed up on the 500s, and it also kept us alive against the European menace at that time, Husqvarna, Bultaco, Mako, Jawa, CZ, and so on. And it also prompted also prompted 2 years later the mighty Villiers company to do their own cylinder. But you scooped them up, and at one time you were making how many a week? You were packing up how many cylinders a week were you selling? It was, well, I do know that it was about 100. Now, a cylinder barrel and a head and a piston is quite a heavy thing, and Len and his gang were actually sending out 100 for weeks on end, and it did really revolutionise the market. So there we are, 2 stories from the past. May I thank everybody on behalf of Len for coming here on this really quite extraordinary day. Ladies and gentlemen, Len Vale-Onslow, 100 years old. And
Put my wheel in. And do the handshake, won't you?
Blow him out first, Len.
Give him a big